We'll stay with that issue because the Albanese government continues to be clueless at best, deliberately malevolent at worst, when it comes to tackling the un-Australian wave of Jew hatred still sweeping our country. There have been 13 major anti-Semitic incidents in New South Wales alone over just the past 16 days, culminating in the firebombing of a childcare centre yesterday morning. And the latest federal response has been, drumroll, the creation of a national database. As if the various state police forces don't already know, there's been a surge in anti-Semitic crime. That was the sole underwhelming outcome of last night's emergency National Cabinet meeting that the Prime Minister finally called after denying for months that it was needed. He wouldn't call it terrorism either, as his own special envoy to combat anti-Semitism has urged him to do. He didn't signal mandatory sentences for terror offences either, as the opposition keeps demanding he does. Instead, we got more hand-wringing, more buck-passing, and the Prime Minister ended up by saying it was up to the states to throw the book at any offenders.
What people have right now, as Chris Minns has said, is serious penalties in place, if anything can be looked at with state and territory jurisdictions. They're looking at that. New South Wales and Victoria have both said that they will strengthen laws.
Is it any wonder we got this then from Peter Dutton today?
Part of the problem that we've got ourselves into as a country has been because the Prime Minister absented himself from this debate early on for political motivations and outcomes. And I think that I can't recall an incident where an Australian Prime Minister, Labor or Liberal, has sacrificed one part of our society and their security to try and win votes in another part of the community.
Not once since the October 7 atrocity and the subsequent disgrace of Australians rejoicing in the murder of innocents outside the Opera House has the Prime Minister grasped the depravity of what's happening here in Australia. He's downplayed race hate as mere protest. And he's treated what's now a campaign of domestic terrorism as little more than local vandalism. Dutton, the former policeman, called that out today.
This is going to escalate to a point where somebody is going to lose their life. Let's be very clear about it. This is not somebody who has liked a nasty post online. We're talking about a childcare centre being firebombed. It is a terrorist attack. Okay, I think we should remind ourselves of that. Somebody breaks into the sports shed here on Saturday night and steals half a dozen beers and they're 15 years of age. That is a criminal offence and the police will treat that seriously, but it is not a terrorist attack.
Perhaps most concerning out of an emergency National Cabinet meeting that did very little last night was news of the briefing by the Federal Police Chief Commissioner to the room that these recent attacks targeting Jews and Israel might have been carried out by criminals and funded from overseas.
Well, they're incredibly serious claims that have been made and they need to be substantiated. More information needs to be provided because it has struck fear in the heart of the Jewish community who now believe that they are the targets of either a transnational terrorist organisation or a nation state engaging in state-sponsored terror in Australia.
Now, when asked about these AFP briefings today, the Prime Minister refused to provide any further detail.
Of course, those investigations are ongoing. I'm reluctant to say anything that compromises those investigations. You
weak little man. The opposition Home Affairs spokesman James Patterson hit back.
The Prime Minister and Tony Burke's dismissal of questions about this morning is just not good enough. You cannot put a claim out there like that with very little detail or substantiation and very little comfort to the community about what is being done to protect them. It would be one of the most grave security crises in Australia in peacetime if it is the case that we have state-sponsored or terror-sponsored terror in our country.
Now, if foreign actors are funding local criminals to terrorise Australians who happen to be Jews, this is a major assault on our sovereignty. What exactly does the Prime Minister know about foreign-funded terrorism against Australia? When was he told? What has he done about it? Did he know anything about these claims before yesterday's emergency national cabinet? If he did, or if his ministers did, if his office did, then it's unacceptable that it's taken him weeks and weeks and weeks to call this emergency meeting. Peter Dutton again.
The Prime Minister needs to be honest here, because it seems that he's at odds with the Australian Federal Police Commissioner. If there has been such a significant international element, what has been the involvement of the federal agencies, including ASIO, and for how long? And why has the Prime Minister never mentioned this before now? Frankly, it just shines a spotlight on the fact that the Commonwealth Government should have deployed resources much earlier to what is a rolling series of terrorist incidents in our country.
If these foreign actors are acting on behalf of another country, it amounts to an act of war against us. So why is the Prime Minister so blasé about what's happening? Surely the Prime Minister wouldn't have had the AFP floating tenuous claims as a smokescreen for his own lack of leadership.
Well, the Prime Minister has not said whether he was briefed on this, when he was briefed on this, whether the National Security Committee of Cabinet has met, whether our intelligence agencies have read brought into this, whether he's discussed this with our Five Eyes partners, and what action he is taking if it is indeed true that we have a foreign-sponsored campaign of terror against the Jewish community in our country. Also yet to be explained is why it appears that so far Australia is unique in being on the receiving end of this.
All of this is just yet more evidence. We've got a Prime Minister who is weak and out of his depth.